You ever wanted to build a web application without writing any backend code? In this video, I want to show you Linkedrecords, which allows you to do exactly this. First, we're going to have a short introduction to what it is, the basic concepts, and after that, I'm going to show you how you can build your own production-ready web application in just a few minutes. So, what is Linkedrecords? Linkedrecords is a backend as a service. So there are plenty of backend as a service solutions out there, like for example Firebase, Supabase, Pocketbase, Convex, and a couple of more. What they all have in common is that you can write your application and reduce the amount of backend code you have to write. What's the difference to Linkedrecords? In Linkedrecords, you write an application without writing any backend code. And this allows a concept which we call bring your own backend. That means, imagine you write your application and your user opens the browser, enters the URL of your application, and then the browser of the user will load the assets which belong to your application. These are the HTML files, the JavaScript files, and the CSS files. Basically a single page application. Once the application is loaded and the browser renders it, the application will ask the user, or can ask the user, to specify a Linkedrecords endpoint. The user can choose to specify the Linkedrecords endpoint hosted by Linkedrecords itself. It can specify the endpoint of any other provider who hosts Linkedrecords, or he can simply self-host the Linkedrecords server. Once he entered the URL, he clicks and connect, and then the single page application will connect to that backend and read and write data only from that backend. Now, how is that possible? To make that possible, we basically have to get rid of three things. First, we have to have a backend where we don't have any domain logic in it. So it means when we implement new requirements, new features, we should not need to change any backend code. Also, we should not need to run any database migrations, and we also should not need to change any authorization rules within the backend itself. Now, how does that work? To make that possible, on the other hand, Linkedrecords uses two basic concepts. The concepts are called records and facts. Let's first have a look on what records are. So records are basically data records. So imagine you have a web application and your web application would execute the code like that. In this application, we would create a record of type long text. So imagine this represents a large document. And once the web application creates that document, Linkedrecords returns a handle. And that handle can be used to get the ID of that particular document. And then later on, we can use that ID to retrieve the document again. We can also update the content of the document like that. And this set function has a little bit of magic in it. So this set function can be executed by different browsers, by different users on the same attribute. And Linkedrecords will merge the content so that it converges on all browsers that display that particular value. Behind the scene, it's using an algorithm called operational transformation, and it is the same algorithm which powers, for example, Google Doc and the collaborative feature of Google Doc. So this set function is a little bit of magic. Further, you can get the value. Like with this getValue method, you can receive the current value of that document. And you have a subscribe method. So whenever some other user changes that document, your user will receive a notification with the exact delta that has been changed on the document. And you can apply this delta to, for example, your editor. And there are different types of records. Like in this example, we saw the long text record. But there's also like a key value record type, which you can think of like a JSON document, for example, how you would have it in MongoDB, for example. But also you can save blobs, like for example, avatar images and so on. Whatever requires you to save files, you would use a blob record type. Now, how does the authorization and the collaboration work? By default, everybody can create a record. So a user can sign up and create records. At some point, the system will try to ensure that a user cannot breach its quota. So a linked record server comes with a default quota for every user so that not every user can create an infinity amount of data. But other than that, if you don't look at the quota, everybody can create records. And by default, the record a user creates is only visible to the user who created the record. So if two different people create two different records, those records are only visible to those two persons. Now, we have to figure out two more problems to build a real web application. One is record retrieval. So how do I query my database? The other problem is authorization. How can I collaborate on the same data and share authorization? Let's have a look. To do these two facets, we use a concept called facts. And a fact is basically a string, an array of 3 strings. And these 3 strings have a name. So the first one is called the subject, the second one is called the predicate, and the third one is called the object. So you can think of it like a sentence in a natural language. As a subject or as an object, I can use 3 different things. I can either use the ID of a record, I can use the ID of a user, or I can use a term. What is a term? We will find out a little bit later. As a predicate, the developer of the single page application can basically use any string he likes. So the predicate is pretty free, so any developer can decide, I want to use this kind of predicate, and that is fine. As long as the predicate doesn't start with a $sign. The $sign has a special meaning. It basically every predicate that starts with a dollar means that you are like specifying the authorization, the permissions of that particular subject. Also, the asterisk has a special meaning. Whenever a predicate ends with an asterisk, it means it is a transitive relationship. We will see a little example later on what transitive relationship can do. Now, while the creation of records is quite free, so everybody can create records, the creation of facts is strictly controlled. So to create a fact about something, there are certain rules in place which the user needs to, or the single page application needs to know, or the developer of the single page application, to be precise. Now, how does it look like? Let's say we want to create a document. Then we would create a long text record here again. And now to retrieve that record later, so we can use the ID, but then we always have to remember the ID, which is quite cumbersome. So we can create a fact about that document and we can kind of label it. We can say that the document with that ID is a document. Now, as the subject, we use the ID of the document. As a predicate, we can use whatever. So the developer of this application decided that is the predicate he wants to use. So, but this can be any string. And as an object, we use document. And the document here in this case is a term. What is a term? That is something that everybody can use in an object statement, but it has to be declared before it can be used. Meaning that this particular function would actually not work in that state because we haven't declared the term document yet. We will do a little bit later. Now, to retrieve the document, I can use this find function, and I would say I want all documents which subjects is a document, which we previously tagged as with is a document. And then I would retrieve a list of documents which I can then work on or display or edit or whatever. And now let's have a look at the term definition. So previously I mentioned that everybody can use a term definition as an object, but it needs to be declared before somebody can do that. And now here in the first part of the screenshot, we see 4 term definitions. The subject of this term definition is the actual term, which I later want to use to classify things and so on. And the predicate needs to be is a term for, so this is important. I cannot choose any predicate here when I do want to do a term declaration. And then the object is some random string. So the developer of that application can put whatever he likes to for documentation purposes, or imagine later if an AI agent wants to like query my database and understand the data, that would be very helpful for the AI agent. Once these terms are declared, they can be used as object. So everybody can use the term as an object, meaning as an object in a fact statement, but not everybody can use the term as a subject in a fact statement. You see in line 461 and 462, we are using the terms actually as subjects. So this would only be possible for the user who declared the terms. So everybody can declare the term. Everybody can declare a term, except the term is not declared yet. If somebody would declare a term and the term is declared yet, nothing would happen. So basically, the first user who declares the term is like the owner of the concept of this term, and he can refine this concept, like you see here in line 461, 462, and then. From line 464, you see other fact statements where I would actually classify random records as books, as autobiography, and so on. And you also see that the is a predicate is here marked with an asterisk at the end. Meaning that, for example, if I would query all books, I would also receive all biographies and all autobiographies, because we declared in line 461 and 462 that the biographies is a book and the autobiographies are books too. So yeah, enough talking. Let's have a demo. Let's show you how you can build your own application in just a few minutes, and let's get to it. Now, the best way to get some experience with Linkedrecords is to go to the website linkedrecords.com and follow the Getting Started guide. So on the left side, you click on Getting Started and you just follow those instructions. First, we're gonna start a Linkedrecords server locally in our Docker setup. So we download the Docker Compose file. So I switch here to the terminal. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I download the Docker Compose file, and you should always check what is in this compose file and not just randomly execute it. But this looks all fine. It's pretty simple stuff. You're basically just starting a Postgres database, and then you start a Linkedrecords server which is using a Postgres database. So pretty basic stuff. Now we fire this up. This might take a few seconds, especially if you do it the first time. Then the Docker image will be downloaded, so this might actually take longer. Now, if you see this message, you're ready to go. The Linkedrecords service is up and running, and we can start building our web application which connects to it. So to get started, we're using Rit as like a build tool, and we are using a basic React template. And here we go with the default values. We don't start it now. We change into the directory and we install the packages. Now we have some default scaffold application here. I want to clean that up a little bit, so I'm deleting this default stuff. And then I'm gonna open this in Visual Studio Code. So we haven't done anything special yet. This is just a default React application, React template, which we have created with Vite. Now, in the next step, we're gonna replace the app.tsx file with the following content. So basically, just still removing the scaffold code. And now we install a few more NPM packages, one of which is the React client for Linkedrecords. And we also install Tailwind. Now give it a second. Again, we configure Tailwind by replacing the vid config, so it actually uses Tailwind. And we are also going to replace the CSS content in source index CSS, this one. And then we start the server. And if we open that, it's just basically just showing us the text linked records. And now we're going to start to actually implement our first application. Now we copy this part here and replace it with in the main TSX. And then I'm going to shortly explain to you what you see. Now what we're doing here, we basically just wrap the whole application in a linked records provider, and we specify the endpoint of the linked record servers, which here is the local endpoint of my Docker Compose setup. And this could be also like a remote linked record server or a linked record server that you host wherever. So linked records is open source, MIT license, so you can just host it yourself. Or alternatively, you can prompt the user to specify its own linked record server or the linked record server of his choosing. Yeah, but that's basically it. We have to wrap our application in the linked records with the linked records provider. Next is we're going to replace the app, the main app content with that file. So we open this one here and we replace that one. And what this is doing, it's basically, yeah, we're basically building a simple to-do application. And you see we're like checking when the application is loaded. This is the linked records object. We say use linked records here. And we're basically saying, checking if the user is authenticated. If he's not authenticated, we redirect him to the login flow. And once he is authenticated, we say we need a to-do term, and then we try to define the to-do term. Like if this is like the first user who ever opens that application, this term will not be declared, and this user will declare the term. If like the second user comes, this term will be already declared, and then basically nothing happens. Then we're just rendering a section to create new to-dos and a section to list all to-dos. And let's have a look at the section to create new to-dos. And you basically see when we want to create a to-do, we create a key value record with the title, and we mark if it's like completed, yes or no. And then we also pass in a fact which we want to create about this particular record. And we say this particular record is a to-do. So this basically just creates a key value record and directly creates facts about that key value record. And this is basically the function. And whenever somebody clicks this button, it would read the title, and it would create that to-do in the database. And we also have the to-do list where we query all to-dos. So basically the predicate and the term is the same as here in the creation. So this would always like return a current list of all to-dos in the system. And then we can if you know React, this is pretty straightforward to you. You would just like loop over the to-dos and render them and have some event handler here, like for example the on change for the input box. Like this is where you would tick if a to-do is like completed or not. And let's have a look at the onCompleted function. We would basically get the ID of this record. We would retrieve this record attribute, like the handle of the record. Then we would like get the value of the record, which is like just a JSON object. And then we would like override the completed field of that record, and we use the set function, and that would directly save it into the database, and that's it. Now this looks very straightforward, but what you have included here is a completely production ready system which has persistency built in, authentication built in, and we will see later how authorization is built in as well. Now let's have a look at this in our browser. So here we started the vid server, we open this, and it comes with dev OIDC server. So if you know OIDC, it's like a very common authorization protocol, and there are plenty of OIDC servers which you can self-host. There are plenty of managed services for you. Linkedrecords by default, if you are in this development mode, comes with like a dev OIDC server. So that's why you don't have any field where you enter a password here. Because it's meant for development. In production, you would configure like any production ready OIDC server. Also means you have the freedom to choose what fits your needs. Maybe you are a large organization and you already have an OIDC server, then you could use your enterprise identity provider. But here, to get started, you have this dev server where you have a three pre-configured users. So I just click I want to be Alice, and I'm redirected, and these are basically all the to-dos of Alice. Now I can create a to-do here, like do tutorial. I add it, and it immediately shows up. And you see that the list of to-dos here, it is basically a live preview. So whenever somebody or something submits a new to-do which is really visible to Alice, it will immediately show up here. And this is also true if, for example, you open this in another tab, and here you again logged in as Alice, and you would say another to-do. Then this would show up in the other tab as well. If you would share the to-dos with another user, then this would show up directly to the other users as well. Now let's move on with the tutorial. I go back here. Now let's display the name of the user. So I copy this small component here, and I'm just going to insert it here. And I'm gonna put this component just above the new to-do section like this. Now let's have a look at our app. Now we see that in both tabs we are logged in as Alice. This will come in handy in a few seconds when we add a collaboration feature to our to-do list. But before we bother with the collaboration, we want to add an archive feature. So we can like mark things as done, but we also want to like delete them or mark them as archived, so to get rid of them from the list completely. So to do that, we would declare two new terms. One is the archived term, and the other one is the active term. So we go to the section where we actually declare all the terms, which is here. So whenever the application starts, this will be executed, and it will make sure that these terms exist in the system so I can refer to them. Next thing is we are updating the to-do list component. So we are now updating the query. Or let me just copy the whole thing here, to-do list. And so this gets a little bit longer now. And let's go back here where we see what has changed, and I will walk you through it. So we see the query, we modify the query for all to-dos. Because now we want to have like two parts in the application. We want to have one list which shows the active to-dos, and another list which shows the archive to-dos. So let's have a look at this. We see now here we have a button, and if we archive that, it ends up in the archive things. Now I had to reload the page so that the terms will be declared. That's why it didn't work in the first place when I clicked it. Now I had to reload the page, then it would declare the terms. And now the archive button works. And the same way I can restore it, and then it would be unarchived. Yeah, exactly. Let's have a look at the code. So I would have now two queries, and I would say I want all to-dos, and the latest state should not be archived. And then this would be all the active to-dos. And if I want to have the archive to-dos, I would say I want to have all to-dos and the latest state of the to-dos is archived. And this would be the list of the archived to-dos. Then I would have another click handler, which is the set to-do status, where whenever the archive button is clicked, I would create a fact that the to-do is archived or not. And you see here, we are using a different pattern. Like previously, to remember if a to-do is done or not, when we click the checkbox, we would use a field in the key value document. And here we would do another pattern, which we are creating facts about the key value record where we track the state. So you have like two patterns how you would do it. And as we want to query for that state, I've decided here that we would like create facts about that. And you see it's like an append only system here. Like we would create one fact, and if we unarchive it, we just create another fact. And this way you would also have like an audit log, like in the database itself. It would be stored like when exactly the state changed and who changed the state. So this is pretty handy. And again, also here you would see that when you archive it here, it would immediately become visible in both tabs, in both browsers for all the users. Now let's build a share feature where we share to-dos with other users. Again, I'm gonna replace the to-do list component here entirely, and then I'm gonna walk you through what is happening here. It's the to-do list we need to replace. So what we do now is we add another click handler, like another event handler, which is the share to do. And whenever this handler is called, we would prompt the user to enter an email address of a user we want to share a particular to do with. And we then would look up the user ID, which belongs to that email, and we would create a fact. And you see here, we use a special predicate to create that fact. And you see that predicate starts with $. That means it's like a reserved predicate, and it has a special meaning. And this meaning usually means it's like defining who can access that particular record. And we would create a fact that the user with the given ID can access the record. And the record is like the ID which is passed in here. And we would also like add another button which just triggers this to-do handler. And that is basically all we have to do to add the collaboration feature. Now here you see we have two tabs. We're both Alice here. Now I'm opening another incognito tab where I'm going to be another user. Now I don't want to be Alice anymore in this tab. In this tab I want to be Bob. And you see Bob doesn't see any to-dos because by default every record is scoped to the user who creates it. Now Bob can create its own to-dos, and then only Bob sees that. Now let's share. Let's say Alice wants to share this to-do, or let's create a new one first, shared with Bob. And we click the share button. We will be prompted for Bob's email address, which we copy paste here. We click OK. And then you see immediately without reloading the page, Bob will see the to-do. And Bob can also like untick the to-do, like tick the to-do, untick it. But if, for example, Bob would click the archive button, that doesn't work because Bob has only the permission to access the to-do. Where is it? Second. Like we only gave Bob the permission to access the record. We didn't give Bob the permission to use the ID of that record as a subject or as an object. And these are like two additional permissions. Like if Bob should be able to use the ID of the record as a subject or as the object, he would need to have this particular rights. Let's fix that. We scroll a little bit down. Here is that explained again, and here you can see what kind of permission-based predicates are available in linked records, and there's another section which explains this a little bit in a little bit more detail. But what we have to do now is we have to give Bob, or whatever user we want to share to do with, we have to give him the refine permission. Refine permission means he can use that record ID as a subject, but still not as an object. If he wants to use it as an object, he needs to have the refer permission. But for now, we're fine with the refine permission because we now only want to use it as an subject. So let's go back to the code. Let me find the just a second. Let me here we go. Now if we go back to the browser to Bob's view, and if we now archive it, it still doesn't work. Now this is the catch. Alice would need to share it again so that this function is executed one more time, so that actually this fact is created. So let's go copy Bob's email address again, share it with Bob, share it with Bob. Okay, now nothing happens because it was shared before. It's just now Bob has the permission to use this particular record ID as a subject in fact statements. Now if we click the archive button in Bob's view, we see it works, it gets archived, and again it's like the state is updated everywhere. This makes React programming so much nicer because you don't have to deal with all this global state and managing all these events and stuff like that. It just works out of the box. And that's about it. I hope you like it. Try it out, let me know what you think. I'm happy you made it to the end. Have a nice day.